there wasn't enough water, so he pulled the chain. The goose liver went away. Ivan shot the toilet. This is the kind of goings on we had. And one day I was sick, and Ivan brought me an orange. Now you have no idea what an orange meant to a child who'd been starving. First of all, I'd never seen an orange, because in those days you didn't import fruit. You ate what grew, and I'd not had an orange before. And he brought me this orange, and it was wrapped in this white crinkly paper, and I remember opening it up, and it was like the rising sun, and the odor of that orange, oh my God, it was wonderful. And then my mother came and peeled it and gave me a bit to eat, and then she candied the rest of it. And I was only allowed to eat it when I was sick, and I wanted to be sick all the time because I loved this orange. And to this day, every time I see an orange, I'm so grateful. I love oranges. And at this point, I don't know. You see, I don't have timelines and dates, because I don't go into finding out when something happened exactly, because I want my childhood memories to remember them as clean and pure. Because if I start getting too much information, you absorb information and your own memories become tainted to some extent. But I know that the Russians left our house and they all went and stayed outside town. They had like a camp there, and they were always walking up and down the streets singing. They sang a lot. But they weren't bothering anybody anymore. And things started getting a little bit quieter, and then my mother came to see me, and she says, listen, Daddy's coming home. And I said, what do you mean? She says, well, there's a train coming. It's coming from Poland, and Daddy's going to be on it because some of the people who survived are coming home. And she dressed me beautifully and did my hair, and she got all dressed up. And we went to the railway station. We stood outside on the platform, and people started coming out, and we were holding up a picture of my father like this, asking if anybody had seen him, has anybody seen him? And you know, he wasn't on the train. And we went home crying, really sad. And she said, don't worry, there might be another train. There were going to be a few trains. And the people who came off the trains were very scary for me. They were in rags, and I couldn't tell if they were men or women, and they had sores, and they smelled bad, and they had no hair, and they were shuffling, and they were like ghosts, and I didn't like them. But my mother started taking them home to our house, and she would bathe them, and she would give her clothes to women and my father's clothes to the men, and they were telling us what happened to them. And I remember I wasn't allowed to hear this because I was young, but I would hide behind the sofa and listen, and the stories that they were telling, which I'm not going to go into because you all know the horror stories that they were telling. And I remember at this point I got very angry. I started becoming angry as a child. How can people do this to people? I couldn't understand that. And still no Daddy. Every time we stood out on the platform with a picture. Obviously, it wouldn't even look like this anymore, but we stood there with a picture hoping to see him. And one day a man came up to my mother and said, don't wait for him, he's dead. And she said, what do you mean he's dead? Who are you anyway? Do you know him? He turned out to be a friend of the family, but he was in such bad shape that my mother didn't recognize him. He was a man who owned a hotel and casino in our town where my parents used to go and play cards. And he came back. He was deported with his wife and daughter. And when they took them to Auschwitz on the train, when they got to the station, the wife and the daughter were sent directly to the crematorium, and he was chosen to go and work on the other side. And he was saying to the guard, where are they going? And the guard pointed to a chimney that was spewing and he didn't understand at this point. He did later. And this is his daughter. She was 11 years old. Her name was Dita, which is short for Judith. She was a lovely little girl. She used to like to dance and sing. She played musical instruments. She wanted to be an actress when she grew up. And the only sin that she had is that she was a Jew, and she was gassed with her mother. And you know, the poor man who was her father had been a violinist, and when the camp commander heard that, he broke all his fingers and they didn't set them, so he had hands like sort of claws, and I was afraid of him. And this poor man was in a terrible shape, you know. He knew that his family were gone, he had nothing. So he went to the housekeeper where they left all the worldly goods, and she opened the door wearing his wife's dress and looked him up and down and said, so they didn't kill you, huh? Well, anyway, the Russians took everything, and she slammed the door in his face. So he came back to us and stayed with us, and my mother cleaned him up like everybody else, and somehow, over the time, we managed to cobble together out of two broken families, sort of a family. He never became my daddy, but he was my stepfather, and he was very kind to me. And he told me about his daughter. He told me a lot about her. I know her from everything that he told me, and you know, she was like a sister to me. She was only a few years older than me, and I still have terrible guilt about this little girl, because I had her life. I had her daddy, I had her life. She was deprived of everything that I had, and I feel bad about it. And you know, talk about the kids now in school. This little girl, I was talking to one of the schools in an 8th grade, and the kids asked me for a picture. And there's a school project. They made 500 copies of this picture and sent it to 500 middle schools, because her story is on the back here, and they wrote the story themselves, and they sent it to 500 middle schools so that people wouldn't forget her. It's called the Dita Project. And to this day, I go to some schools and I see her picture in the library, and it really warms my heart, because, you know, when I'm gone, nobody would even remember this child. Nobody would even know that she existed. And this is what I'm talking about, the compassion of this generation. And my stepfather brought his old mother to live with us from Romania, and my mother moved in the Catholic grandmother, and these two women battled for me. It was terrible. I was made to pray every night on my knees for my mother's soul, because she kept marrying Jews. And the Jewish grandmother was trying to get me to look at myself as a Jew. And I was dragged to the synagogue on Saturday and to church on Sunday, and synagogue on Saturday and church on Sunday. I preferred the church. It smelled nicer because they had the incense. The synagogue wasn't so great, and I had to sit upstairs. But I tell you, they gave me so much religion. I mean, it's enough to put you off for life. And when I was a little bit older, I would say I was about 10 or 11, my stepfather told me how my father died. He was there. My mother never found out. We never told her. My father had stolen a piece of bread with another man from our town, and they were caught. And they decided to make an example of them. And this was in Poland, sort of April, you know, cold. They stripped them naked and beat them half to death and put each of them in a dog kennel in the parade ground, in the Appellplatz, because every morning all the prisoners had to line up to be counted to see how many died overnight, you know. And these two men were left there to die, and it took my father 2 days and a night to die. And when I heard this, I became terribly bitter. I became full of hatred. I had these fantasies of what I would do to these people who killed my father. I would skin them alive, and I would pull their fingernails out. It was really a sick, 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 evil thing that overtook my soul. And, you know, it took me 50 years to stop hating. I can't say I forgive, because I don't have the right to forgive somebody else's death. I can forgive my own death. But if somebody kills you, I can't forgive on your behalf. But I have no hatred in my heart. I have no hatred at all. I have sorrow, I have sadness, but no hatred. I'm a very, very happy person, because, you know, I survived, and I'm not a victim, because once you become a victim, people win. They didn't win. I'm a survivor. I'm not a victim. And I'm very fortunate that I'm alive, And, you know, people say to me, well, how did you get rid of the hatred? Slowly I realized that if your heart is full of hatred, there's no room for anything else. And I consciously tried to meet people who are kind, tried to think good thoughts, tried to read nice things. And slowly, as I said, it took 50 years. It took me a long time to get over this. And today I have a wonderful family. I have 4 sons and 4 granddaughters. And you know, somebody said to me, well, what do you do for revenge? I live. And every time I gave birth to one of my sons, it was giving the finger to Hitler. It's true. And you know, I have a wonderful family. I have a very mixed family. I have one granddaughter who's half African American, one who's sort of, we think Mexican, we're not sure what her grandpa was. We have another one, my step-granddaughter, who's half Chinese, and I have one who's half German. When my eldest son came and he said to me, oh, I'm getting married to this wonderful Canadian actress, her dad was in the German army. I swallowed, and then I swallowed again, and I swallowed again, and I thought to myself, no, we don't visit the sins of the father on the children. And in fact, she's my daughter-in-law, and she's fine. And when the little girl was born, they had this beautiful little daughter, and I remember holding this child in my arms and sobbing, and I was thinking, here's this baby who's the grandchild of a perpetrator and the victim, and she's perfect, and this is what it has to be like this. We have to go forward. We cannot go back. We have to go forward. We have to make sure it doesn't happen again. But we cannot go back. You cannot live on hatred. And you know, one of the things that I miss so much is not having a grave for my father or even for Dita. These people were sort of wiped out. They disappeared. They are nowhere. You know, there's nothing tangible about them other than what lives in me and possibly my children. And sometimes, even now, I sort of look up at the stars and I feel his presence. And when I go into the barn with all the hay, I really feel very safe. I love the smell of the hay. And, you know, when my stepfather was on his deathbed, he had Alzheimer's. He was here in America with me. And I was holding his hand as he was dying, and he kept calling me Dita. He suddenly thought I was his daughter, and I was so glad to be able to give him that comfort. For some reason, he managed to believe that I was his daughter. And, you know, I have to speak because I have to speak for the dead, because they're not here to speak for themselves. I have to speak for Dita, especially for Dita, because she embodies everything that was wrong there. And you know, I never met the German Nazis. All the people who were killing us in our town were neighbors. They were people down the street who suddenly decided that they didn't like the Jews, and they were very happy to move into their houses, get rid of them, to take their things. You know, it's hatred is very, very easy. People are very easily led. And you know, when you think about it, Hitler came to power because the Germans were on their knees. After World War I, they had to pay back such reparations that there was no way they could survive. They were hungry. They were literally hungry in the streets. And here comes this man who's going to promise them to fix everything and to give them back their dignity, and they're going to have food and everything was going to be great. Of course they followed him. And this, again, brings it to my sheep theory. I truly believe that 10% of people are truly, truly good, like the woman who saved me. And 10% are pretty evil. And 80% are sheep. And it's the sheep who scare me. The sheep will follow the bully, because it's much easier to stand by and do nothing and giggle when the bully is hurting someone. Because if you're going to be good, you have to actually do something. You have to speak up. You have to make some kind of effort to change it. But if you're just walking around, you know, being happy with the bully, of course it's much easier. And you know, I tell kids that, you know, if you're going to become a sheep, just be careful who your shepherd is, because it's so easy to choose the wrong shepherd. And you know, when I talk to them and I say to them, you know, doing good makes you feel better. It's not altruistic. Doing good is actually very good. It's a very nice feeling. If you do good, you feel better. You feel good about yourself. And if you feel happy doing bad, then you're a psychopath. And of course, none of them are a psychopath. So they say, oh no, we're good, we're good. And, you know, I tell them not to look away, because unfortunately, one of the biggest sins was to look away. Not even to do something, but to do nothing, to look away. And if somebody's persecuted, you don't look away. And I tell them that one good act a day really makes a difference. And I tell them, look at the person sitting next to you. You may not like her, but you can love her for 5 minutes. Everybody can love someone for 5 minutes. Try it. Try it. And people say to me, well, if you're half Catholic and half Jewish, why are you a Jew? Why is Obama black? He is as white as I am Catholic. But he is perceived to be black because that's how people see him. He's our first black president. I'm a Jew because I was Jewish by persecution and by perception of other people, and therefore I'm a Jew. I would not deny it because it would be an insult to my father, but I don't feel any different from you or me. You know, Jews are different. You know, people say, you don't look Jewish. Well, how does a Jew look? I don't have horns. And, you know, this whole scapegoating that went on. I mean, you know, when people are hurting, they have to blame somebody. When you're walking down the street and you trip on a rock, you don't think, I'm a clumsy idiot. You think, the town didn't do the roads properly. There's a rock on the road. There shouldn't be a rock there. It's not my fault. By the same token, people always have to blame somebody. We started off with, we blamed the illegal immigrants. They took all the jobs away. Then, now it's Islamophobia. They're all evil. I know lots of very nice people, nice Muslims, you know. I don't want them to become the new Jews. I don't want this to happen in my country. I came here because this is a good place. I came here because I felt that Europe was a little bit too crowded and it had too many bad memories. And I came here because everybody's from somewhere else. You're all nuts. I don't see a single Native American here. So therefore, you're all immigrants. And I don't know if your grandparents had papers or not. You're all immigrants. And there's still genocide ongoing in the whole world. You know, I'm wearing this pin. This comes from Somalia. It's a little brass dove. It's made by children who had limbs blown off. And they pick up the shell casings and they make jewelry and they sell it to be able to afford prosthetic legs and arms. And this should be happening in our world. Unfortunately, it still is. And you know, I came to this country because this is a good country. I truly think that 90% of Americans are truly good people. I've not had any persecution here. I felt welcome. I love this place. I brought my children here because I wanted them to grow up in freedom. And there's more space here, you know. When you put too many rats in a box, they eat each other. I'm not saying there's no rats here, but the box is bigger. And unfortunately, you know, they opened up Pandora's box of hatred nowadays. I mean, I turn on the television and I hear things that I would have beaten up my kids if they had spoken like that in middle school. It just wasn't done in my house. You couldn't talk like that about people, anybody. It's disgusting. But, you know, I just want to read something that, you know, there was a wonderful German pastor called Niemöller who was also deported because he was not a Nazi. And he said, first they came for the communists and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak. And this is what we really must think. I tell the kids that we're all responsible for each other. That wonderful, simple Christian woman that did the right thing and saved me. Not only did she save me, she saved my children and my children's children, whole generation of people with just one good act, one person. The power of each of us is in our hands. And All I ask these children is to think very, very hard before they hurt somebody. And I go and speak, and I speak, and I will keep on speaking as long as I live, and I'll speak to whoever will listen to me. And I thank you very much. I'm not unhappy, I'm a very happy person, you know, because, you know, when people invite me to schools, the kids always said to me, oh no, this old lady's going to come and she's going to cry and she's going to be sad. And then one little kid wrote to me, said, that's what I was expecting, but then you came. So that was it. Thank you.
This has been a production of Wolfeboro Community TV, bringing your community to view.